People are kind of trickling in. Feel free to start whenever you'd like.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. As you're all joining us here in our room, I'll just start with a quick introduction. My name is Paul LaChapelle with Montana State University. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the next hour or so. Amber King is the Assistant Dean of Students here at Montana State University. She's also a doctoral candidate working on her dissertation for her PhD in adult and higher education. She serves as a board member on the QFSA, that's the Queer Faculty Staff Association at Montana State University, and is passionate about helping others. She enjoys hiking with her beagle Sydney, knitting with her cat Bindi, and laughing with friends and family. And I also do want to acknowledge the great financial contribution that your office made, Amber. So thank you so much for supporting our 2023 Virtual Rainbow Summit. Amber, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul, and thank you for having me. I was saying earlier, I can't find the chat on my screen. It's like, I just can't figure it out. So if there are any things that go into the chat box, I think Paul or Danny will be letting me know. I do have the Discord open. I figured that out. And so if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and shout them out, or someone will interrupt me and read from the chat box. So I'm hoping there's a little bit of interaction as much as possible as you can on a virtual screen. So yeah, today, so I'm Amber King, and I'm basically presenting a little bit about my dissertation, the plans for my dissertation about LGBTQ plus college students' experience with body image during COVID-19. All right, so there's my fun headshot. By day, like Paul said, I am the Assistant Dean of Students, where I focus on supporting our students of concern here at Montana State University. And then I also advise our 8 fraternities on campus. And then by night and on the weekends, I'm a PhD candidate in adult and higher education working on my dissertation. So I like to say I go to college to study college. I'm going to cover more about my positionality a little later in the presentation, but just wanted to do a general introduction. So what we're going to cover today is really going over what's going to be my dissertation proposal. So at MSU, our dissertation proposals are the combination of the first 3 chapters of our dissertation and sharing that with your committee and, proposing to do the actual research before you collect the data. So with chapter 1, I'm going to talk about where my idea came from. With chapter 2, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the most relevant articles that I'm looking at. And with chapter 3, I'm going to talk about how I plan to complete this research and kind of integrated into that. Anyone else who is working full-time, working on a PhD, thinking about doing those things, feel free to shout questions out or share anecdotally about your experience. I'd love for it to be more of a conversation if possible. So starting with chapter 1, where did my idea come from? Essentially, it was my own personal experience with COVID-19 and body image. As soon as, we went on lockdown and my entire world moved onto the computer screen, the default setting, as we all know and we can see right now with Zoom and Teams and WebEx, is that you see a mirror image of of what your camera shows of what you look like in all of your meetings. So in all of my classes, in all of my work meetings, in all of my social interactions, all of a sudden I was seeing myself. And I think Ballison did a good job in 2021 of kind of quoting this experience. And they say, imagine in the physical workplace for the entirety of an 8-hour workday, an assistant followed you around with a handheld mirror for every single task you did and every conversation you had. They made sure that you could see your own face in that mirror. This sounds ridiculous, but in essence, this is what happens on Zoom calls. So that was my first observation with COVID-19, that I could see myself when I was talking, and I was like, wow, I can't believe that those are my facial expressions when I'm in meetings, and things that I'd never thought of before because I never look at myself during the day. I'm always looking at other people. So that became the idea for my dissertation. In addition, we, as probably across the nation, all of our gyms closed, and I had a pretty regular routine of going to my gym. Luckily, I live in a rural area, so I actually picked up backpacking, which is something I'd wanted to do for a really long time, and finally took the opportunity to do that during COVID. But initially, the closure of my gym and the change in my routine really threw me off, and I had some spiraling with my body image. I'll share this a little bit ahead of time, but part of my positionality is I have struggled with my own body image and disordered eating over time, and definitely I felt like COVID-19 impacted that in a different way. And finally, another inspiration for my idea was this new idea around food, that kind of prior to going into lockdown, there was a lot of stockpiling of food, specifically getting comfort food and obviously non-perishables, and essentially building your quarantine pantry. And so that, in addition to the fact that that there wasn't a lot of opportunities for maybe fresh fruits and vegetables if you didn't feel comfortable going to the grocery store. And then food was constantly available. So I wouldn't, when I was in my office, I wouldn't necessarily grab a snack and head into a meeting, but I could if I was at home on my computer. And so there's a lot of grazing behavior that happened for me. So combining those experiences that I had at the onset of COVID-19, I also was looking at my positionality. I identify as a white cisgender bisexual woman. I'm able-bodied. I'm a U.S. citizen. I don't even know how you identify socioeconomic status anymore. But as an assistant dean, we don't make a lot of money, but it's, I can pay my bills, and I didn't lose my job during COVID, which was really important. So I kind of combined my positionality with my experience and my previous interest to come up with my my topic for my dissertation. So here's where I wanted to give an opportunity to hear from some of you anecdotally. What were some of your experiences with body image during COVID? Either things that you noticed, things that might either parallel some of the things that I've shared, or maybe you have never thought about your body image during COVID this entire time, and this concept is completely new to you. And I'd love to hear anecdotally if anybody is comfortable sharing.
And I'll keep an eye on the chat, and I believe you can all unmute yourself. So go ahead, anyone who would like to unmute yourselves.
I will say that there was lots of conversation with folks around, I don't even know what the slogan was, but gaining your COVID-12 or go, that thing. So that was a conversation that was happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I've found several articles about kind of that play on the gain the freshman 15, which in itself is a terrible motto or slogan, and then changing it to the gaining the COVID-19. And having a lot of judgment around that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
so just go ahead.
Aaron's in the chat just said, I actually had just undergone bariatric surgery only a few months before COVID hit. So I was very aware of my body, but kind of in a different way. I also took it as an opportunity to go running.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I imagine a lot of our people at the conference are from probably the Western Rocky region. And so we were able to get outside and do some outdoor activities where, people in larger cities really didn't have that opportunity. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Aaron. And Chris also posted in the chat, also missed the gym experience, slowly gained a bunch, didn't really affect me then, but now it's bothering me a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and that's part of what I'm looking for in my study is not just the onset. I know myself, I'll be transparent. I know I gained 20 pounds over the course of COVID. And then we were home for a while and nobody had to wear pants. And then, coming back into the work environment and recognizing we're in a different place and we don't even really know how COVID's going to affect us long-term biologically. And then also dealing with that body image is huge. Thanks, Chris. So I'll tell you my secret. Whenever I ask a question and I wait for a response, I count to 12 in my head. And so I counted to 12, and I'm assuming there's no other comments right now. All right. So one of the things I looked at was where's the gap in the literature, as any good researcher would do, right? And so, like I just mentioned, what do we know about how COVID-19 impacts us? The interesting thing that I first observed was a lot of papers were published right away. And if anybody's tried to publish anything before, you know that sometimes it can take a really long time. But because this was a new phenomenon and they wanted to get more research out there, there were a lot of papers that had priority to come out talking about mental health, body image, other pieces that were affecting how our brains connected with COVID-19 as different than maybe our respiratory response. And then the other piece was who is being studied. So I had identified that I wanted to look at body image during COVID. I knew what my own positionality was. Excuse me, I'm also getting over bronchitis. And one of the things I noticed right away is historically and still currently, when we're talking about who is being studied with body image, we're typically looking at white cisgender heterosexual women. And so we really, not we, but researchers and research in general is not looking at underrepresented populations, marginalized populations. We just have a lot of research about this one group of people. And I think it's important whenever we're looking in the gap in the literature that we need to hear from other voices. And so that was one of the things that keyed in for me right away. Like, you know, it's clear, we know that white cisgender heterosexual women struggle with body image. We've researched everything that we can about that. And then and that's the majority of the research that we have out there. And then we're missing hearing from those voices from other people. And my assumption would be that's a different experience for different people with body image. And I want to hear those stories, and I want to share those stories in my dissertation. So I came up with 2 research questions. They're very similar, but a little bit different. One being, how did LGBTQ plus college students experience body image during the initial onset of COVID-19 and throughout the continued pandemic? And then 2, what contributed to the LGBTQ plus college student experience with body image during the initial onset of COVID-19 and throughout the continued pandemic? So I want to hear people's experiences, and I want to hear like the specific experience to them, because I showed you where my ideas came from, but that doesn't mean that I had the only experience, right? I want to hear other people's experiences. Even in the chat, we've heard people having significantly different experiences from me, and I want to hear those stories and share those. So moving into chapter 2, when I was looking at literature review, there were 3 prominent articles that stood out for me and kind of guided me in my research. So first would be Rogers et al. I just put the links to I don't even know if you can link onto there, but those are the citations. I probably should put pictures or something more interesting to look at, but essentially Rogers looked at or identified potential research areas that were connected to body image and COVID-19. And a lot of those already connected with my ideas, but it was a researcher validating that my ideas were good ideas for a research proposal. So that kind of helped me move forward at the initial data or literature collection. And then Quathhammer and Joy, I might be saying that wrong, was one of the first articles that came up. I love research that has clever titles. So Being in a Queer Time popped up, and they're really looking at the LGBTQ plus experience with body image during COVID from citizens of Canada. And one of the many things I think that was interesting, their study was mixed methods. So they collected survey data and then invited people to come back and do individual interviews with them. And they definitely found things along the spectrum of some people said, being in isolation or in lockdown was really lonely. And then other people said, it may have been lonely, but it gave me time for reflection and I figuring out, learning more about myself and my identity. And then some people said, I had to, lose all of my social and support networks by being on lockdown or being home, or for students leaving school and going maybe home to live with family that was not supportive. Where on the other end of the spectrum, people said, well, because I was in a virtual place, I got connected with the LGBTQ plus support groups that were virtual online, and I actually built more of a community there. So it was a really interesting spectrum along with that they found in their research. And then kind of rounding things out, I came across Schneider et al., who was really looking at a systematic review of any of the research articles that had been published in the first 2 years of COVID, along with eating disorders and body image. And I actually kind of did my own analysis of their analysis and read through all of the abstracts that they had in their reference page, determining if they fit with something that would go into my literature review, and then compiling those and specifically looking for qualitative things, as I'll share in a little bit, that's my lens for research. Any questions about my articles or anything that I've said so far? All right. So when I'm looking at chapter 2, I'm really looking at this funnel approach that I've got. I have all of the articles that I've read, and I have to kind of put them into themes, and then I have to identify the gaps. And when I'm telling my story, it's sort of being told in a funnel way. So that's kind of where I am right now. I feel like I have a really strong chapter 1 and I have a strong chapter 3, but chapter 2 is it's kind of a disorganized mess right now. And so I'm working to synthesize those articles and put them together. And this is kind of where I wanted to touch base on that. I work full time, and then I'm also working on my PhD. And I just acknowledge how hard it is to balance work, life, and school all at the same times. And as many people, I'm easily distracted, when there's something sparkly and fun over there, that's the thing I want to do. That's what I want to be connected to. And then it's hard to keep that motivation. And, it's a beautiful weekend and I'm inside writing my dissertation. So I didn't know if anybody else that's on the conversation wanted to share a little bit about their experience with balancing work and school, or even if you had any thoughts about what it would be like balancing work and school.
I can say that balancing work and school is something that I've done for a very, very long time. And once you get sucked into it, you really kind of just keep doing it. Even when you're done with school, you'll come up with a couple of jobs, or maybe being a single parent on top of that. I don't know. But once you get into that, you're just knee deep in it and you don't realize that you need to come prepare until you become into a situation where you're not having to do those things, and get to really focus on one thing at a time. And that was something that I got to experience. And it was very eye-opening, because you just don't know the self-care that you need to do, and the just the things you need to do to take care of yourself when you're not in that survival mode anymore.
Right. Survival mode is such a good way to define that. And you're right, you don't even realize it. Like, I don't even think about the fact that none of my friends are writing a dissertation on the weekend, and they don't have to balance that. But then there are things that they're doing. I don't have children, and they're balancing raising children, and that's very different as well. So thanks for sharing. Anyone else? All right. Moving along into chapter 3, I feel like when I was working on my methods chapter, I needed someone to give me permission to write the dissertation the way I wanted to. I'm actually writing my dissertation in first person. I'm really including myself, so it's not necessarily autoethnography or an auto methodology, but there obviously is going to be a lot of me in my own research. So I kind of broke it down into 4 sections, one being the context, then my research design, kind of connected with my data collection and my data analysis. And I want to go over each of those a little bit with you. So when I talk about my context, how do I center myself within my research? And so when I think about ontology, I think about what is reality. And my sense is reality is, I have an idealistic way of looking at that reality is subjective, and it's constructed by both ourselves and those around us. When I look at epistemology, I think about how does one view knowledge? And so that's where I believe that knowledge is socially constructed and it's interpretive, and that individuals place meaning on their own experiences, and that's how we see the world. When I look at axiology, I'm looking, oh, did someone say something?
What's up?
I think someone.
She is in the.
Okay, there you go. Axiology is our values, our morals, and our ethics. And that's where I thought it was important to put my positionality. So the main part of my positionality I wrote in chapter 1, and then I expand on it in chapter 3. Most researchers would put it into chapter 3. And then the methodology, I'm doing a qualitative research study. I've decided to do a narrative research study because I want to hear about people's experience and tell their stories. And then looking at that, viewing that from a social constructionist framework. So here's where it gets interesting. I get to start making decisions on what I'm going to do. And I was all over the place, as we probably are when we're starting a research study. But I decided that I'm going to work with MSU students, Montana State University students, specifically who attended in spring and fall of 2020. Because I want to know what happened that initial year of COVID, and the people that I interview, or the participants, can be people that are still here in school. They could be people who have graduated, people who have stepped out or dropped out. Maybe they were also employees here taking classes, but the important part is I want to hear about that experience of being a student during that first year. I also obviously need them to have an identity within the LGBTQ plus community. I'm not specifically saying what that identity needs. I'm hoping for a diverse cross section there, but I might end up with. I'm hoping to interview 4 to 5 individuals, and they might all have a similar identity within LGBTQ plus. I'm planning on doing virtual interviews because I want things to be consistent, and I'm aware that some of the people I might be interviewing don't live in Bozeman, Montana anymore. And so I'm going to need to find a way to connect with them virtually. And then I'm also aware that by doing virtual interviews, I'm going to have the screen issue that we have here with the mirror imaging. And so I'm going to be addressing that in a different way. When I'm collecting data, I'll have the information from the interviews that I have collected. I'll have my own observations. So following each interview, I'll be recording things I noticed, maybe within either tone of voice or body language that came across through those virtual interviews. I will do my own documentation, which is my memoing. So kind of keeping a research journal throughout that time period and incorporating my thoughts as I process through data collection. And then I'm asking each participant to bring 1 to 3 artifacts into that conversation. That can be anything that, connects them to that experience during COVID. It could be something from social media. It could be something that was like, their talisman while they were at home during COVID, anything that might be a physical aspect of their experience. Then my plan is to move along to data analysis. And I think I thought that when I went to do a data analysis for a narrative study, that there would just be this magical way that you just follow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turns out that's not the case. There's a zillion different ways that you could do a data analysis for a narrative study. And so I'm taking pieces from thematic analysis from Braun and Clark, and then from Lego's writes, reads, interrogate, thematize, and expand, and then also James's narrative analysis that they created themselves. And I've created my own 5-point analysis plan that I'm going to go through, where I have 3 stages of listening and reading. The first stage will be for accuracy and clarity. I'll be I'm hoping to get the transcriptions from the virtual site that I use, and then I'll have to go through for accuracy and clarity to make sure that everything is said is actually what was said. Because if you've ever looked at transcriptions, sometimes they turn things around that is not true if they can't understand what you're saying. The second round, I will be listening and reading, doing more of a thematic analysis and trying to pull out themes from the different stories. The third time I'll be thinking with theory, and that's really using that social constructivist lens, making sure that I'm seeing the meaning that is being created in the stories or being presented in the stories. I plan to summarize each of the stories. So I'll have the 4 to 5 summaries of each of the interviews and their artifacts and my observations for those individuals, and then create a narrative construction. And I don't know yet if it's going to be one full narrative construction of all 4 to 5 individuals, or it might be 4 to 5 separate narrative constructions based on the similarities or the differences I find when I collect that data. So throwing it back to all of you again, and listening what I've presented for my proposal, I'm wondering if anybody has any insight about what I'm not seeing. Where are my blinders on things that I'm maybe not considering because I'm looking through my own lens?
One thing that I have noticed and I experienced also for myself is like during COVID and using Zoom and these different platforms was actually beneficial for some folks who have like mental health concerns or maybe some neurodivergency and those different things. Would be really interesting to see if any of that information surfaces in your research.
Yeah, there were definitely, I think within any of the researchers' studies that I've read so far, I mean, everybody had some sort of, negative impact that they indicated about the COVID experience, but a handful of them included these positive experiences, like you're saying, that having that virtual experience or working from home was really beneficial for some people. And, that whether we're introverted or extroverted, how we get our energy, hearing those stories, because my story is definitely different. Thank you so much for that. All right. So I have created probably 100 timelines of how I'm going to get to the end. I started my PhD in 2017. So my new plan, and I sometimes feel like it's important to speak these things out loud to hopefully manifest them for getting my doctorate. This is hopefully by 2024. And so if everything goes right, and I'm saying that this is plan, it's probably not even plan A at this point. We're probably on like plan Q. So I hope to do my proposal on or around August 30th. We can't propose over the summer, and so I'm in this place where I'm not able to get my proposal done by May. I'll probably have it done sometime this summer, but my committee's not fully on contract until August 15th. So that's the first day I can give them the proposal, and they need 2 weeks to review that. And so that's where my committee would be reading chapters 1 through 3. I'll present that to them at the end of August, and then they'll give me hopefully a green light to then send out information to get approval through the IRB, and then move forward with collecting data. So assumingly, I would begin my data collection in September, and I put a bunch of question marks because I'm essentially going to collect data until I've got that saturation, excuse me, and gotten interviews for 4 to 5 folks. I'll be marketing my project around campus and on social media because I imagine I'll have some participants that are current students, and then, like I said, some that are alumni or who have stepped out or who are also employees here on campus. So obviously finding the participants. I don't really think this is cheating, but I did do a little like social media, like, threw things out there just to see if there would be anyone that, I could, if I could get enough participants, and I think I have enough connections and people that are interested in the research that I'm doing and fit the participant model, that will come to fruition. I'll hold my interviews, I'll be transcribing things, and then my analysis will be happening. I won't necessarily wait until I've done all 5 interviews before I transcribe and analyze. It'll be kind of an ongoing thing. As I get them done, I'll start to do the analyzing process. Then I have to write chapters 4 and 5. I assume that I'm going to be doing that in the spring semester and over winter break. So I'll be writing up my results and my discussion. And obviously there'll be things I needed to edit in chapters 1 through 3, as things might have changed. There might be additional pieces in the literature that I want to add, different thoughts that my committee members present to me. And I rate chapters 1 through 3 as I will be doing this study, and then I'll have to go back and say I did this study for my final dissertation. I hope to defend, or I would need to defend in April of 2024. That at my university consists of a public presentation and a committee presentation, and again giving my committee 2 weeks to read my dissertation. Following, hopefully that gets approved, I would be doing my final edits in May, and then the formatting for my dissertation, so that fits all of our graduate school requirements prior to graduation. I didn't look up the exact date in 24, but sometime in May 2024, that would be my plan. I also have my worst case scenario is if everything couldn't get done in time to walk in May, that I would continue to work on it during the summer, then do my defense at the beginning of fall 24, and I would still graduate in the year 2024. So either way, I feel like 2024 is going to be my year. Any questions about my timeline? So that's what I have for my presentation on my proposal, and I would love to kind of open it up to question and answers, any things that anyone wants to share.
You can feel free to write anything on the chat. I am keeping an eye out for the chat here as well. So if you have any questions, or maybe just some comments or some words of encouragement, this is a lot of hard work. I haven't tried to do something like this, but I'm potentially doing it in the future, and this is amazing. So we get we have a good luck on your work comment in the chat. Any questions? Okay,
And then
I don't really.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I just wanted to wrap up and share my email address. If anyone wanted to email, had any questions, if you're on the presentation and you actually fit as one of the participants and you're interested in being part of my narrative analysis, then please let me know.
And you can have access to Amber's channel. I'm going to be putting it on the chat as well. So for anybody who may be interested or has any additional resources for Amber that would work there, the link is on the chat at the moment. All right.
Well, thank you all so much for listening and interacting with me. And I know I talked a little fast, so you have a little bit more free time between your next presentation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Amber. Thank you for your presentation. I'm going to be highlighting the next couple sessions that are happening. So the next sessions that we have are YFCH extension, Educators Should Fly Rainbow Flags, and the one right after that, or concurrent to that one. So you can choose one of the other two, which is going to be drawing a line from the AIDS crisis to the present. So you'll have 2 links. They're on the Discord. They're also on our program as well. These sessions will happen at 4:30. So we have a good amount of time, good 4:30 Eastern time. So you have about 40 minutes to kind of take a break, get some lunch, or you can switch over to the other session as well if you want to catch the tail end of that. Either way, thank you all for showing up. And thank you so much, Amber. Round of applause, virtual applause. Thank you so much.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.